In a galaxy ruled by fear, where empires rise through silence and strength, one empress shocks the universe with 5 forbidden words. I choose the human one. Chaos erupts, alliances crack, and ancient powers demand her loyalty, or her love. But she refuses to bow. Who is this human that made the most feared ruler of the stars question everything? And what happens when the galaxy tries to erase the one thing it can't control? Hope. If you're new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The great chamber of Noruvai shimmered with quiet power. Its walls were alive, carved from crystal that held the memory of every empress who had ruled before. Light moved like liquid across the floor, and soft vibrations hummed from the stars beyond the transparent ceiling. 30 thrones shaped from ancient stone circled the center platform, each one occupied by a leader from a powerful alien house. They watched in silence, their eyes cold, unreadable. At the center stood Empress Halvara, still as a statue, her silver skin reflecting the starlight above. Her robe of memory threads floated gently, whispering old victories. Her voice had ended wars. Her command had silenced rebellions. Yet today she stood quiet. The question had already been asked. It echoed through the chamber like a drumbeat. That would not fade. The high voice of the tribunal speaker had cut through the silence. Who do you choose as your consort? It was not just a question of companionship. It was about power. In Noruvai, choosing a consort meant aligning with a house, showing favor, declaring intention for the next 100 years. Some had waited lifetimes for this answer. Ambassadors leaned forward. Ministers held their breath. Even the stones beneath her feet seemed to wait. Halvara's eyes moved slowly across the circle of watching rulers, then downward, not in fear but in finality. Jalen Oren, she said. A silence followed that seemed to stretch across galaxies. Then came the gasps, the whispers, the disbelief. Human? Someone breathed. Impossible, another spat. The high speaker, a tall being wrapped in ceremonial light bands, leaned forward. Please confirm, he said, though his voice trembled. A human from Earth? Halvara nodded once. Yes, she said. Jalen Oren of Earth. The storm began. Several representatives stood and shouted. One laughed bitterly. Another stormed out, their cloaks snapping behind them like a broken flag. The representative of House Merrick fainted in her throne. Disbelief swirled like smoke. The great chamber, usually a place of controlled ritual and sharp words, now pulsed with chaos. But Halvara did not move. Her face was calm, carved from will and truth. Her gaze did not seek approval. Instead, it reached backward in time, to a different chamber, to a different day. She had met Jalen by accident. During a summit of science and diplomacy, he had taken the place of a sick ambassador. He was not prepared. He wore a jacket that didn't quite fit and carried a datapad filled with half-finished thoughts. The summit had been serious. War was close. Noruvai had already chosen a side. The room was full of generals and ministers, each nodding along to the planned course of action. But Jalen had raised his hand. No human was meant to speak, especially not him. Guards moved, eyes narrowed, but he didn't stop. You're wrong, he had said. The room went cold. Halvara had turned to look at him, not with anger, but with a quiet curiosity. In Noruvai, no one told her she was wrong. Jalen did. Then he explained. He spoke of the signs, the signals of the two species preparing for war. He told her they were not preparing to fight. They were mourning. The movements were grief rituals, not battle formations. He had data, comparisons, observations. He even spoke of Earth funerals and shared sorrow across cultures. Some delegates laughed, others rolled their eyes. Halvara listened. She canceled the attack that same night. It had been the first time in over a decade that her word had reversed a military decision. Her advisors were furious. Her ministers protested. But Halvara did not care. She had seen something rare. Jalen had not spoken to win favor. He had not asked for anything. He simply spoke what he believed was true. They met again and again. Some meetings were official, others were not. Jalen showed her music from Earth, poetry that made no sense but stayed in her mind like a rhythm she couldn't forget. He told her stories of artists, rebels, and quiet heroes. He made her laugh once, and the chamber they were in shook slightly as if the stars themselves were listening. Halvara had seen countless warriors and suitors. She had heard 1,000 promises. But Jalen had offered nothing and gave everything. He asked questions. He disagreed. He doubted. And in his doubt, she found something she hadn't known she was missing. Truth. Unpolished and honest. Now back in the great chamber, voices shouted again. What can a human offer that our noble houses do not? A lizard-skinned ambassador barked. Halvara turned to him slowly. Her voice was soft but unshakable. He asks questions, she said. He dreams, he doubts, and he hopes not just for himself but for others. He is weak, someone shouted. He is honest, she replied. He is untrained. He is unafraid. He is just a man. Halvara paused. Her gaze swept the chamber one last time. Yes, she said, but what a strange and wonderful thing to be. Just a man. And with that, she turned from the center of the chamber. Not in shame, not in defeat, but with the quiet strength of someone who had made a choice the galaxy would never forget. Behind her, the arguments continued. Some demanded her removal. Others called for war. But a few remained silent, thoughtful, as if seeing something they had never noticed before. Because it was not just about Jalen Oren, it was about what he represented. Something new, something dangerous, something the empires of the stars had forgotten. Hope. The Garden of Echoes was not a place for visitors. It was carved into the living cliffs of Noruvai's inner mountain, hidden beneath layers of shifting stone and ancient permissions. Only rulers were allowed to walk there. The trees grew from memory soil, their glowing leaves humming softly with the thoughts of every empress who had ever passed through. Water moved like silk across the stone paths, carrying whispers from the past. It was a sacred place where silence was meant to teach and reflection was expected to shape wisdom. And yet, that day, a human walked beside the Empress there. Jalen. Oren looked uncertain. His steps were slow, careful. He glanced at the glowing plants, unsure if touching anything would cause offense. Halvara, walking ahead of him, did not speak at first. Her robe dragged across the path like a whisper from an old dream. Finally, without turning, she said, "You do not need to be afraid here." Jalen nodded slowly. "It just feels like everything here is why watching." "It is," Halvara replied. He laughed softly, the sound strange in the quiet. Figures. They continued in silence for a time. The garden did not judge, it simply remembered. And perhaps that was more dangerous. Jalen had been brought here not as an official guest, but as something undefined. Too many watchers already questioned his presence. After Halvara's announcement in the Great Chamber, half the noble houses had demanded an emergency vote. The other half had retreated to consider their next steps. Some believed the Empress had made a strategic move. Others whispered of madness, and a few, the most afraid, called it love. Halvara stopped at a tree that shimmered gold and blue. She placed her palm against its bark, and a soft light pulsed beneath her hand. She closed her eyes. "They want you to step back," Jalen said, quietly. "They want me gone." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "Yes? And what do you want?" he asked. Halvara lowered her hand. "To understand why they fear something so small." Jalen tilted his head. "You mean me?" "No," she said. "I mean the truth you speak, the way you question, the way you refuse to follow the pattern." She turned, her eyes thoughtful. "They are afraid of the unknown, Jalen. But you are the unknown." He smiled faintly. "That's usually not a compliment." "It is here." The days that followed were quiet on the surface, but tension crackled like lightning beneath the skin of the palace. Ministers avoided Halvara's gaze. Messages from allied systems grew shorter, colder. One by one, offers of political alliance were withdrawn. Her chief advisor, Koruv, requested a private meeting. He stood in front of her, stiff and careful. "You must release him," Koruv said. "You must undo this mistake before it becomes a fracture in the Empire." "What mistake?" she asked. "You chose a human." Halvara's expression did not change. "I chose someone who reminded me I was alive. Your heart is not the foundation of Norovai. Our strength is." She stared at him. "Then perhaps our strength is hollow." Koruv left without another word. He knew she would not be moved, but he had to try. Many within the palace were not trying anymore. They were preparing. Preparing for what? Halvara was not yet sure. But she could feel it. There were new shadows in old corners. Her orders were taking longer to be followed. Security scans returned incomplete. Data trails ended in blank screens. The Empire was holding its breath, and something was stirring in the silence. Jalen noticed the changes too. The way guards no longer nodded at him. The way servants avoided his path. Even the doors he used to enter the learning chambers now scanned him twice. It was small, quiet hostility, the kind that grows deep before it surfaces. He asked Halvara once, "Should I leave?" She looked at him carefully. "Do you want to?" He shook his head. "But I would if it helps you. You are not a burden, Jalen. You are a mirror. They do not like what they see in themselves when they look at you." One night, as the moons of Norovai rose glowing with soft red light, Halvara invited Jalen to the observatory above the sky chambers. It was a dome of clear stone, where stars could be seen in full shape and color. They sat together alone. "This place," Jalen whispered, "feels like a dream." "It was built during the age of still fire," Halvara replied. "Before peace, before unity. The rulers of that time believed that even war deserved beauty." Jalen turned to her. "Do you regret it? Choosing me?" She did not answer at first. She looked up into the vast, endless sky. "I regret waiting so long to feel something real," she said finally. "They taught me to rule. They taught me to win. But no one ever taught me how to live." Jalen placed his hand near hers, not touching, but close enough for warmth to pass between them. "Maybe," he said softly, "we can learn together." Halvara closed her eyes. In that moment, something shifted inside her. Not weakness, not confusion, just a quiet promise. The fire that had won her the throne now burned for something else. But far below them in the deep halls of the palace, meetings were being held. Trusted guards were replaced. Communications were sent through hidden lines. And in the heart of the Empire, where power was measured in silence and control, plans were forming. They were not ready to destroy her. Not yet. But they were ready to push. Push her to choose. Push her to surrender. Push her to forget what it meant to feel. And as the stars moved silently above, unaware of the coming storm, the Garden of Echoes waited, because it too remembered. It remembered every ruler who chose silence over self, and it now watched the first one who might not. The chamber of high flame was built for truth. It had no corners, no shadows, no doors to hide behind. The walls were made from polished white stone that glowed with inner heat, a light that revealed every detail, every movement. In this place, lies burned, and silence spoke louder than words. It was here that the Empress Halvara stood alone, surrounded by the high circle of Norovai. Her back was straight, her expression calm, but her heart beat like thunder beneath her robe. This was not a trial in name, but everyone in the chamber knew what it truly was. The voice of Elder Varen broke the silence. "You must choose him," he said. "Your empire or the outsider." Halvara did not blink. "He is not an outsider to me." Elder Varen's voice sharpened. "He is not one of us." "And yet he saw what none of you could," she replied. The circle stirred. Some looked down. Others frowned. Elder Sira, the youngest of the council, stepped forward. Her face was tired, her tone softer. "Halvara, we do not question your wisdom, but your choice has weakened alliances. Trade routes have closed. Outer houses prepare for rebellion. They do not trust your connection to the human. Halvara met her gaze. Then they never trusted me. Only the image of me. Elder Varen spoke again. This is not just about you. You carry the will of Noruvai. Your choices shape our future. You cannot afford this kind indulgence. The word hung in the air like poison. Halvara took a breath. You call it indulgence. I call it clarity. For the first time in my life, I am not acting from fear. Not from pressure. But from understanding. They did not answer. They didn't need to. Their silence was already a verdict. Meanwhile, deep in the palace, Jalen Oren sat in a narrow chamber with no windows. He had not been charged with a crime, but he had been asked to remain still, to wait, to be quiet. The guards outside his room did not speak to him. His access to communication had been cut. He didn't know what was happening above, but he could feel it. Something was breaking. A soft chime echoed through the room. The door opened. A figure stepped inside. Captain Zural, once Halvara's most trusted guard, now stood across from Jalen with unreadable eyes. They will not harm you, Zural said. Jalen studied his face. But I'm not free. You are a complication, Zural replied. Jalen stood, slowly. You used to say I was a lesson. Lessons can be dangerous, the captain said, and then he left. Outside the palace, the people of Noruvai whispered. The story had spread. Halvara had chosen a human. Reactions were mixed. Some called it weakness. Others saw it as bravery. Still, the streets were tense. Murals of Halvara had been painted over in some districts. In others, artists added Jalen's face beside hers, glowing with starlight. The empire was dividing. Not by weapons, not yet, but by belief. Late that night, Halvara returned to her quarters. The guards nodded but did not meet her eyes. She found Jalen waiting inside. Someone had finally let him return. They've made their offer, she said quietly. What is it? Jalen asked. Step down from the throne, she answered. Or cut all ties with you. He looked away. The silence between them stretched like a wound. Then you should do it, he said. Halvara turned sharply. What? Step away from me, Jalen said. Keep your crown, keep your empire. You think it's that simple? He shook his head. No, I think it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But I won't be the reason Noruvai collapses. She stepped closer. You're not the reason. You're just the excuse. He didn't speak. Halvara reached for his hand but stopped herself. When I met you, I was a weapon, a tool forged by tradition. But you reminded me I was still human, still something more than a symbol. Then be that, he whispered. Even if it means letting me go. The next morning, the high circle gathered once more. The chamber of high flame was fuller than ever. Representatives from outer worlds had arrived. The galaxy was watching. Halvara entered slowly. Her robe shimmered with soft blue light, the color of truth. Elder Varen stood. Have you made your decision? Halvara stepped forward. I have, she said. A hush spread across the chamber. I will not step down, she continued. I will not sever my bond with Jalen Oren, and I will not obey a council that believes love is weakness and silence is strength. Murmurs. Gasps. One representative stood to protest. Another followed. But Halvara's voice rose above them all. If you believe I am unfit to rule, you may remove me. But you will not break me. Noruvai is more than tradition, more than fear. It must become something new. The light in the chamber burned brighter. Some members of the circle looked away. Halvara turned and walked out. No one stopped her. And that was the beginning, not of war, but of the unraveling, because the trial had ended, and Halvara had chosen the light. The sky over Noruvai shifted the day Halvara left the palace. It was not the kind of change that could be seen with eyes alone. It was in the air, in the way the light bent differently across the old walls, in the way people paused before they spoke. The Empress had walked away from the high circle without fear, without apology. She had not been pushed out. She had not begged. She had made a choice. And somehow, the stars seemed to move slower after that. Jalen stood beside her as they stepped out of the Imperial gates. There were no guards, no soldiers, no parade. Only the sound of their footsteps on the path of carved stone. Behind them, silence followed. In front of them, a city unsure of what to believe. And yet, as they walked, doors began to open. People stepped out of their homes, not with weapons, not with shouts, but with wonder. No one had ever seen the Empress without her crown. No one had seen her walk as one of them. She held Jalen's hand, not as a ruler claiming a prize, but as a person choosing her path. They walked for hours, down roads that once held her statues, through markets that had paused in fear, and slowly people followed. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds, not to bow, not to protest, but to witness. Something had shifted. Something old had cracked open. Far beyond Noruvai, the story spread. At first, it was dismissed. The council called it misinformation. They issued warnings. They labeled Halvara a threat to unity. They called Jalen a manipulator. But the more they spoke, the more others began to listen, not to the council, but to the people. Artists painted Halvara standing beneath falling stars. Musicians wrote songs about the night she chose a single voice over 1,000 commands. Old enemies who had once feared her now wondered if she had always been more than the armor. Messages flowed through the galaxy. Quiet words of support, secret offers of help. Not from governments, but from people who understood what it meant to feel unseen. Earth responded in its own way. Not with warships, because it had none to spare. Not with diplomats, because none were trusted. Instead, it sent voices. Storytellers, hackers, dancers, old soldiers who remembered how to survive with nothing but courage. Children sent drawings of the Empress smiling. Engineers from forgotten colonies created signal loops that broadcasted her speech over and over in 100 different tongues. Her words, "I choose to be real," were printed on banners that waved on moons and stations across fields of cold steel. The council tried to stop it. They erased footage. They blocked channels. They passed emergency laws. But for every voice they silenced, 10 more rose. The fire spread, not of destruction but of imagination, of defiance, of hope. Halvara did not try to lead. She did not ask for rebellion. She only walked and spoke and listened. She met with those who were never invited to the council halls, the poor, the forgotten, the quiet ones who dreamed of something better. She listened to their fears. She told them they mattered. And in doing so, she became something the galaxy had never seen before. Not a queen, not a ruler, but a light. Jalen stood beside her, never ahead, never behind. He spoke when needed. He asked questions others were afraid to ask. He reminded people that truth was not always loud, that love was not always soft, that sometimes both could stand in the same place. In time, soldiers began to lay down their weapons. Not all, not at once, but enough. Enough to shake the council. Entire units refused orders. Governors resigned. Cities declared independence from fear. And the council, once powerful beyond measure, began to fracture. The final moment did not come in battle. It came in stillness. One morning, the gates of the Imperial Palace opened without force. Halvara walked through them once more, her steps steady, her gaze clear. The high circle did not stop her. They had already lost the one thing they could never control, belief. She returned not as an empress, but as a symbol of what could be. She stood in the great hall where her name had once silenced armies. This time it was quiet, not out of fear, but respect. Jalen stood with her, not on a lower step, but beside her. Together, they faced a future still uncertain. There was no crown, no throne, no title, only a promise that the new Noruvai would be built on something stronger than fear. In the years that followed, change was not easy. It was slow, painful, often chaotic. Mistakes were made. Arguments flared. There were moments when everything nearly collapsed. But they kept going, because now the foundation was not silence. It was truth. Young leaders learned diplomacy through stories and music. Old laws were rewritten by voices from many worlds, and in every chamber of power Jalen's words echoed. Ask questions. Doubt. Imagine more. The galaxy remembered Halvara not for her conquests, but for her choice. And Jalen, the human who had no army, no legacy, was remembered for being what others feared most: a mirror. Together, they proved that power could kneel to compassion, and the stars, once proud and cold, seemed to shine a little warmer, not in surrender, but in awe.